Good morning, everyone. Hello. Oh my gosh.
Starting nursery.
It's the big one. Oh my. Oh, hey. Wonderful. All right. So we are truly an intergenerational class today. We have 2 babies in attendance today. We're very excited about that. And some of us represent the older end of the spectrum. I wasn't talking about you. Not talking about you. And Jack, you're confusing me being on the other side of the room.
I'm sorry.
I know.
It's the right side.
Yeah, that's not the correct side. And
I have a praise.
Yes.
Aside from my husband being here with me today. Tuesday, we signed the contract on our house. We got $6,000 more than we asked for. Is that
Yay.
good or what? That's wonderful.
Very, very good. All right. Let me say thank you, first of all. Thank you to everyone who participated in our mission project. Those of you, Helen, like us, who've been here from the beginning of this class, know that we have not been highly organized most of our existence, which is about 16 years.
15 out of 16 weeks.
And we did how many baskets?
13 baskets, and we collected $240 in cash.
Wow.
That's just our class.
$240. Yeah. So thank you. The church as a whole. You'll see when you go in the sanctuary this morning. There's the food bags, but there's also a cornucopia emblem representing the 81 baskets that the church has done for families that are looking.
Yeah, that does it. Actually 13.
We did 13. Yeah. Oh my goodness, this is so good. So we get some energy going, and we're looking. Shannon and Terry are in conversation about how can we do something more all the time.
Yeah.
And so you may be getting an email, I think, about that, right?
I'll just tell you. What we're going to do, we have a list of ideas from Heather, and after the Thanksgiving break, I'm going to send out a survey through SurveyMonkey by email, and then you can kind of decide what you want to do, and we're going to get the energy going in January, and maybe do something once a month or once every other month as a community service project.
Great.
Yeah, look at us. I mean, who knew? Yeah, who knew? Wonderful. If you signed up for our Thanksgiving luncheon and you have not yet paid, like I have not, till just now, I'm paid now. Go by the front office and you can pay there. If all else fails, just come downstairs. If you were on our sign-up sheet, you have a place reserved. So come down at noon for lunch.
What do you say if you didn't pay, that they've got a frozen TV dinner?
Dave's going to give you a frozen turkey TV dinner.
From the 50s.
Mrs. Swanson. Very good. Okay, well, we'll get to our prayer concerns at the end. Today, first of all, because of the way Christmas falls this year, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve are on Sundays. And so we're not having Sunday school those 2 days. I know some of y'all would have come anyway. And I appreciate that. So we're not having Sunday school those 2 Sundays. So that means whatever we're going to do for an Advent study, we need to begin next week, even get 4 weeks in on it. And so I've got multiple opportunities. I've not settled on how to do that. And I'm just wondering if anyone has a suggestion for an approach to the Advent season that maybe you've been curious about. We can talk about the various characters in the Christmas story. We can talk about the way the different Gospels tell the story. We can talk about Old Testament versus New Testament. Anyone have just an itch for something you'd love us to talk about?
Well, not necessarily talk about, but I have a CD put out by a gentleman who talks about the Bethlehem Star, which I think is just absolutely amazing. And I don't know if we have opportunity to show anything like that.
Okay.
But I think
That is an interesting topic, to combine science with it, and there's interesting historical evidence there as well. Any other ideas?
I like your idea about the Old Testament versus the New.
Old Testament versus New Testament on that? Okay.
Some prophecies maybe that are fulfilled.
Prophecies, okay, okay. If you have other ideas this week, shoot me a note, and I'll figure it out. Whatever we're gonna do, we'll just do on Sunday.
Can we have an advent candle thing?
Well, we sure could.
I love that.
Can we have an Advent candle?
Lighting.
Yeah.
I know we do that.
Well, yeah, we'll surround it with donuts, maybe.
You've been entertainment chairman too long.
Oh, I know. All right, so today we are going to talk about generosity as part of the all-in emphasis we're having here. And thank you for showing up despite knowing that. I gave you advance warning last week, and you could have stayed away. So I'd like you to think about where in your life you have learned either about or not about a generous lifestyle. So I'll tell you a story of my own that I think I've told before. I remember of course, growing up in the church and taking the offering and all that, those of you who remember the old, was it a 6-point record system? 6 point. And you had the present, offering, brought your Bible, you read the Bible, yeah, all that, you got points for it.
You got 30
in
points.
Baptist church. So, I mean, I'd grown up in that, but here is the earliest memory I have of being taught something about generosity without words being spoken. I'd have to think back to when it was. It had to have been when I was in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade, somewhere in early elementary school. In those days, living in Oklahoma, it's hard to imagine this happening today, but the Oklahoma Baptist Children's Home, in the late summer, would send the kids who lived at the children's home, the kids without parents living or whatever reason they were there, out to spend a few days with families in Baptist churches all over the state. And I'm an only child, as you know, and we had a kid from a boy from the Oklahoma Baptist Children's Home come stay with us for a few days in our house. And we went school shopping for both of us. It's clear in my mind. I can visualize the store. I can see the jeans. And what my mother did that day was we bought back to school clothes for him and for me. And that wasn't a Sunday school lesson. That wasn't a sermon.
Yes,
But
it
it's-
was.
But it was in a way, right? Because it was a demonstration.
Yes, exactly.
That vision has stuck with me for so very, very long. What are some ways that you think you have been taught through word or deed about generosity in your life? Helen?
I had an aunt that was a sample maker at a dress factory. And she would always buy bolt-ins of things that were not big enough for big runs of clothing. So she had this big stash of fabric in her home. And she dressed me, my sister, my cousins, the pastor, 7 kids. And
7 kids?
And at Easter, before Easter, we would go to the orphanage in Fort Worth, the girls' orphanage. And she would take swatches of fabrics. And she would have these girls, there might be 20 of them, look at these swatches of fabrics, and they would get to pick 1 or 2 or whatever, and tell her what they wanted. This kind of a dress, or dress with a jacket, or whatever, skirt and blouse. And she would go home and she would make all these. And we would take all of these clothes up there to the orphanage. And to see these girls put on these new clothes that they got to choose, that they got to design, and that the squeals and the happiness, I'll never forget.
Beautiful story. Someone else? Where have you learned generosity, Jenna?
I grew up, my parents were both children of the Depression, and I just assumed everybody lived the way we did, and my dad could fix anything, and I never realized neighbors would call when their attic-mounted hot water heater wasn't working, and they needed my engineer father to help them carry the hot water heater down and bring the new one up. And he, Shell Oil Company in Houston and in Midland would do these things where all these, and it was men mainly, sorry, very sexist, but the men would go to neighborhoods and just flat fix everything. Well, it never, I always thought everybody's dad did that. And I got to college and went, oh, no, not everybody's father can do that to begin with, nor is that the way they're able to do it. But it was just something I grew up with and thought was the way you lived.
That's a beautiful story, too. Someone else?
I met a little lady one time when I lived in Houston, and she fell down, and I helped her, and we became very good friends. And this little lady had nothing, absolutely nothing. But we were going downtown Houston one day, and there was a person that she obviously had known that was homeless. And she proudly introduced me as her friend Lynette. And she went into her purse, and she gave this little lady, like, what, $2 or $3 that she probably could have used to buy her own food, but she did that, and the joy that came out of her being able to do that, just, I think about it today, and I feel brought to tears because of what she did, that it was just her thing to do, you know, and it was just amazing of how
Thank
she
you.
did that.
Thank you. Beautiful. Someone else?
Well, as
Mark,
you all
and then
know, I'm a missionary kid and grew up in Africa. And you know, you think as a missionary that you're going over to help people, but really the opposite is true. You go over there and they teach you about joy. And we would be invited into really literally mud-built huts. They were the most generous people you have ever come across. Whatever they had, tea, goat meat, I mean, anything they had, they shared with you. It was an amazing lesson for me, amazing.
Thank you. Kathy?
Well, when I was growing up after my father died, which was when I was about 11, we were just poor as church mice. My mother saved all year long for Thanksgiving and Christmas because as a Depression mom, her big gift to everybody was how much food and treats and everything that she put out at the holidays. But the Dallas Naval Air Station out at Grand Prairie, when it was the Dallas Naval Air Station, we had every Thanksgiving and every Christmas a service person to come and spend the day with us. Your story reminded me of that. And Mother always had a present for them and a pretty card for them and a $2 bill. And I didn't realize, but back during World War II, it was more common for a serviceman or a woman to be given a $2 bill as their lucky charm to put in their wallet. And so just recently, about a year ago, I acquired a $2 bill just by kind of accident. I've been keeping it in my purse. And Jack had something, I've forgotten what happened, and his driver's license thing, and I loaned him my $2 bill for the driver's license. And then he gave me the $2 bill back for the surgery.
That's great.
Okay, someone else with a story?
Mark,
Esther?
as you know, I'm an identical twin, and the Turner family was a large family with very little means financially. So guess who got all of our clothes? They didn't have to buy one identical dress for them for their twins because Ruth and Esther always had them handed down, and they were gracious for us all their lives and would thank us when they were older. And I was thankful that they didn't just go anywhere, but went to the Turner
Right.
for their twins.
Well, your aunt made your clothes, didn't she?
Well, not many of them.
Someone else
She
with a
bought
story.
them.
Thank you, Esther.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I learned a lot early because my mom worked for $217 a month at juvenile probation department. She put my dad through med school. And my mom was just an awesome lady, was just an awesome lady. She is in heaven now. And my dad could have made literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he went to Africa and Brazil and, you know, did it for the love of his heart.
Beautiful story too. Yes, Ann?
Well, it took me quite a while in life to get the idea of giving. So I remember as a child, we lived quite a ways from our church, and I would walk to Sunday school every Sunday, because Mother and Daddy didn't go at that time. And so she would always give me a quarter to put in the offering plate. But I would stop at the drugstore and buy a candy bar with part of the quarter. So fast forward 30 years, working here at the church, and we had our first big financial campaign where we were trying to raise $50,000 in one day. And of course the salary back then was sort of like she was talking about, next to nothing. But I remember going down to Lakewood Bank, where a member of our church was the president, and I borrowed $100 to give on that day. And that really, I always remember how good that felt inside, that I didn't have the money to do it, but I borrowed and then paid, of course.
Have you paid that back yet?
Still owe $10.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. That's a good story too. Anyone else? Yes, Shirley?
Again, talking about the depression, I'm a child of depression too, so everything was saved. But my mother could take nothing and make something out of it. And in the whole neighborhood, whoever had some kind of need, my mother was there. When women, back then, you know, women stayed in when they had children, and she was there cooking family meals, cleaning the house, taking care of the babies. She cleaned houses for people, you know, that weren't able to themselves, and did it to make some money so that I could have a few things and my sister could have a few things. She was the neighborhood angel.
Beautiful. Cody?
Well, there's a gentleman in our neighborhood that is a fantastic painter, and he's painted a lot of houses inside and out. Oh, anyway, he has 3 children, and I collect clothes to give around to the people that don't have it. So I called him and I said, Flavio, I have a sack of clothes for you and the girls. When might you come by and get it? And when they set a time, and then it was about an hour later. And when I went to the door, they had one of the orchid plants that are in all the grocery stores and they just couldn't come without paying. And they were taught that. They came from Mexico City, way up in the mountains beyond. And his family, he still goes back to his family and his mother's. But people that have somewhere along the line, somebody gifted them something, I don't know, but in return, even though they were going to get something they knew was used and everything else, they gifted it to me, and I thought, now that's a learned habit, or someone made an excellent example to me.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So here's a quote for the day. I heard this week on a program, but it actually dates back several years. There's a guy who is, I think he's an economist, has an academic and a writer named Raj Patel. Anyhow, one of the lines he has about economics, and particularly capitalism, is this: the opposite of consumption is not thrift, it is generosity. The opposite of consumption is not thrift, it is generosity. So here's why I like that, and here's why I think that resonates with the Bible. 2 often, we think that thrifty is the thing that we need to be. And yes, there's virtue in being thrifty. Benjamin Franklin said so. Certainly better than over-consuming, right? And we're heading into the season of overconsumption in every conceivable way, as we typically experience it. But I love the way he turns this around to say, it's not just about what you save and don't spend, but it's also about how you use the resources that you have. And I hope, as you've listened to these stories that people have told this morning, some of them are about money, some of them are about time and expertise, some of them are about possessions that are shared, right? They cover a lot of territory in here. But what is the root of all of those? It's having a heart of generosity that's willing to give and not hoard the things that you've been given. I think that's the unifying theme. Helen?
If anybody is not a Sam's customer, I see this every time I go into Sam's, and it sticks with me. It's a quote from Alice Walton, probably the most wealthy woman in the United States.
Yes.
And it says, it's not what you gather, it's about what you scatter.
Did y'all hear that? Yeah, that's beautiful. All right, so within the Bible, there are certain ideas that are sort of like through-going themes. Most of the things that we want to pull out and preach on from the Bible are not through-going themes. They're isolated incidents, right? I had an email from someone this week asking me, what does the Bible say about cross-dressing? And they quoted a passage from Leviticus. And I said, let me say this. It is difficult to build an entire theology on one verse from the Bible. Right? So that's a whole other subject. But that gives you an idea of, we often pick little things and we build our whole theology out of these little things. But there are some things that are really big ideas in the Bible. Caring for the poor. Huge idea in the Bible. Old Testament, New Testament. Love for neighbor. Huge idea. Runs all the way through the Bible. Sacrifice. Big theme of the Bible all the way through. So is the idea of generosity. And so what I'd like us to do this morning is I need several volunteers. And I'm going to assign you some passages. And really, I need a lot. I'm going to need like 10 or 15 volunteers. So if you're thinking, not me, all right. Susan, I saw your hand first. Exodus 35:22. All right. Francis, Deuteronomy 8:18. Who's next? Cody, Proverbs 11:24 and 25. Mike, Proverbs 19:17. Let's see.
Going back to back.
Yeah. Proverbs 22:9. All right, Donna. Let's do this. Matthew 6:21. All right, John Eric. Matthew 6:33. Gina. Matthew 10:8. Who's my next reader? Oh, way back here. Yes. Luke 6:38. And I need one more. Lynette, Luke 21:3 and 4. Oh, wait, I need another one. Esther, Acts 20:35. Acts 20:35. I need one more. All right, Shannon. 2 Corinthians 9:6. All right. Now that's a lot of Bible verses, and that's what I want us to do is to get a sampling today of some of the things the Bible says about generosity. And you will notice it's not always just about money. it's sometimes about money, a lot of times it's about money as well. And this is just a sampling of many, many verses we could pull out today. So these don't have to go in any particular order. So as the Spirit leads you and you've been assigned a verse, just raise your hand. Cody, you want to go first?
No, what was the first Proverbs you gave out?
The very first Proverbs I gave out was 11, 24, and 25.
Right.
What's the second proverb?
The second proverb I gave out was 1917.
Mark, what was my verses?
What book was it? It was Acts 20:35. All right, let's listen up, everyone. All right, Shannon and then Francis. Listen up.
This is from 2 Corinthians. This is chapter 9, verse 6. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully.
Okay, Francis.
Deuteronomy 8:18. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant, which He swore to your forefathers as it is today.
Okay. Someone else?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You ready? Gina?
Matthew 10:8. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without pain, give without pay.
Woo! That is some stout scripture right there. Yeah, stand up on its own. Don Eric?
Matthew 6:33. But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you.
Classic. Yes, Donna?
Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Okay.
Proverbs 11, 24 and 25. It is possible to give away and become richer. It is also possible to hold on too tightly and lose everything. Yes, the liberal man shall be rich by watering others as he waters himself.
Ooh, yeah, I like that. Mike?
Proverbs 19:17. If you help the poor, you are lending to the Lord, and He will repay you.
Acts 35. And it was a constant example to you in helping the poor. For I remember the words of the Lord Jesus. It is more blessed to give than to receive.
This is Proverbs 22:9, and I'm doing the message because
Okay,
I love it.
that's fine.
It says, generous hands are blessed hands because they give bread to the poor.
Beautiful. Okay, who else is ready? Lynette?
Luke 21:3-4. Truly I tell you, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she out of her poverty put in all she had to live on.
Okay, and I have, be merciful, just as your Father is merciful.
Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Who else has it?
I hate to ask you, but is it verse 23 or 24? Because they're both interesting.
We'll read them both then.
Okay, I will. This is from Exodus. And everyone who possessed blue or purple or crimson yarn or fine linen or goat's hair or tanned ram skins or fine leather brought them. Everyone who could make an offering of silver or bronze brought it as the Lord's offering, and everyone who possessed acacia wood of any use in the work brought it.
This was the scripture from last Sunday in worship as well. Who else have we not heard from? Was that all of them? I didn't keep count.
Did they do Luke 6:38?
You want to read this, Luke 6:38?
Oh, I will.
Okay.
For if you give, you will get. Your gift will return to you in full and overflowing measure, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, and running over. Whatever measure you use to give, large or small, will be used to measure what is given back to you.
Okay, thank you to all of our readers. What do you hear? And again, this is a sampling. We could have done 3 times this number of verses and taken up a lot more time on this. What do you hear as a theme out of this? How does this hit you? As we've gone all the way from Exodus to the epistles in the New Testament with this. What jumps out to you from what you just heard?
But she just read, if you give, it'll be given back to you. Not necessarily what you want or expect, but you're blessed. I mean, give, blessed.
John Eric?
I think it's about some of the intention and coming from the heart. I mean, the passage where, somebody out of poverty is giving everything versus, but it has a lot of wealth. I mean, it's financially probably more, but not spiritual.
Yeah, good point. Cody?
Mark, I think that this is the Bible. This is what we've all used from the time we started reading and everything. But it hasn't occurred in the churches really, our church people to some degree. Thanksgiving, Christmas, maybe Easter, and I'm so amazed that it isn't more in the forefront. There was a campaign 100 years ago from the Baptist General Convention of Texas, and it said, "Beyond These Walls" was the campaign banner. And that struck me as being, right, not that we shouldn't gather together and do study and do everything else, and it's not just food and clothing, it's just a smile on an elevator, hello to somebody passing going after smoke in the bar and the thing or something. It's just something, and I'm guilty of it. We don't do it, and I'm kind of sad that it wasn't beat into us. Start being.
You didn't grow up right then.
That's true.
Donna?
I'm kind of with Cody. I mean, what's amazing to me is that generosity and the theme is so prevalent, but why is it that you hear it around stewardship campaigns and people go, "Oh no, they wanted my pocketbook again"?
Yeah. So here, Donna's made a great point. I want to say two things about that. I purposely have not constructed a lesson today that's on giving money to the church, even though that's what we're talking about. That's not the point of the lesson today.
That's because you posted the video.
That's right. Yeah, see the video. I referenced you to the video. But in my experience, my observation, people who give most freely money also give themselves in other ways too. So here's one of the things I hear said sometimes. Well, I don't give to the church because I give my time, or I serve in this other way, right? And sometimes that's true, but a lot of times it's not really true, right? Because generosity is a mindset in your life. It's not something you just do in one area. And I think many of us have been brought up that way, by example. And we need to be bringing up our children in that way as well. Some of us have come from stingy families. Right? Some people do not come from generous families. And it's hard to learn generosity in anything if everything that you're focused on in your upbringing is accumulating, saving, preserving, and fearing. Right?
Right.
So one of the good things about church, when we talk about this, is we're able to sort of come in and do an attitude adjustment along the way. Yesterday morning, I was out, due to my neck situation, I can't run right now, so I'm walking a lot, and I was really in a foul mood, not fit, just feeling sorry for myself, all the things that are falling apart, and my old age problems, and the effects of medication, and the side effects, and I was in a foul mood, and the wind was blowing fiercely yesterday morning, if you remember, and all the leaves were I'm not kidding, they were flying off the trees yesterday morning. And I'm walking down the street in my bad mood, and the leaves are blowing, and I see this whole thing of leaves just sort of blow at me, and I instinctively reached up my hand, and a beautiful golden leaf just landed right in my hand. And I carried it the rest of the walk. I was not going to give up on it. I took it home and put it on the shelf as a reminder to, there's more there, and I'm preaching to myself hard right now. Right? I need to remember that leaf as a reminder of the provision of the Lord, even when I think things aren't going the way I would like them to go. Right? So part of the reason we come to church is to have those kind of attitude adjustments. Right? Part of the reason I hope you read the Bible daily is to have an attitude adjustment along those ways. And really, one of the reasons that it's good to give your money is not just because the church needs it and can do a lot of good with it, but because it's a good attitude adjustment for you as well. It's a good discipline to be in. And I have the privilege of working with a lot of people around here and in other nonprofits that I work with who repeatedly testify that the joy they get in sharing the things they have, whether it's money or clothes or food, is greater than they ever possibly imagined. Because the life of generosity is a happier life than the life of thrift alone. Yes, Polly.
If you haven't gotten one of these yet, go by and pick up one and read Jacob Topper's Gratitude Preparing for Worship. And that kind of goes along with this. People who practice gratitude experience more joy in their lives as a result. Joy is the fruit of the spiritual practice of gratitude. And when you truly give to somebody, not just, oh, well, I'll go write this off, right, here and here. And I don't know about you, but my mailbox is full every day with people wanting, from Florida for the poor. Hey, I live in Texas, it's bigger in Florida, we have more poor. But, when you do give something, give it with joy, and gratitude that you are able to do it, and then the joy you receive back. It's not a duty, it becomes a joy, and he said, he's saying you don't have to be grateful for big things. Sometimes it's little, but she said a smile. Somebody smiles at you, and it just makes your day all of a sudden. And then his final question was, how would you have me give back, Lord? Yeah. And it is really good.
Good.
Check
good. Yeah, Kathy.
I'm not sure this fits in, but it's not about money.
Okay.
But when I was a little girl, I remember it was an icy night. There had been, the sidewalks were frozen over, and there was a water main that had broken down about 2 or 3 houses from where we lived. And they were this was at night, and it was, it was freezing. I don't know what the temperature, but it was freezing. And so my daddy felt so sorry for these men, so he put on his golf shoes so he could walk on the ice, and he fixed a pot of coffee, and he took it down to these men who were working, fixing the water main.
So I love that story, Kathy, because it demonstrates a point we've not made yet, and that is that generosity is often ingenious, right?
Right.
Because generosity finds a way to do surprising things for people. And I think that's part of the joy of it as well. One of the struggles one of the questions you may come to is, okay, the Bible teaches generosity. Why does that have to result in giving to the church? And where did that come from, right? Well, because a lot of times I'll have people come to me and say, all right, I want to be a tither, but I don't want to give it all to the church. I want to give part to here and part to here. And okay, my answer to that is, that's between you and God. I'm glad you're going to give. I'm glad you're going to do something to share the wealth that you have, whatever it is. The biblical injunction is predating the kind of church that we know today that does so many social service things, right? So the church is sort of like United Way sometimes, in that we bring together all sorts of opportunities. So we're serving the Wilkinson Center and White Rock Center of Hope, and City Square and Gaston Christian Center, Gateway of Grace, and CBF Global Missions. We have all these things that come together. And so the idea that really bears fruit today is that you can do more good through one gift to the church than from answering 12 of the catalogs or mail solicitations that you get, because it's vetted along the way.
And there's a certain amount of trust that you trust the church will choose, the things that you would want to support.
And hopefully there's a trust in that way. But the root of it is the biblical admonition is to support the work of the Lord, right? And then we, together in our congregational governance, have to be wise about how we do that, right? So that we make sure we're doing the right things. And you get a vote in that. You get a say. So, when you serve on the missions committee, and when you serve as a deacon, and when you serve on the advocacy committee, or when you go and do a hands-on project, you're participating in all of this, and it's not just something that's done out there, right?
But you're not giving to the church until after you pay your tithe. The tithe is a request from the Lord, and then when you're giving is beyond that.
Well, I like that, Pauline.
There you go, Mark.
Yeah.
That's almost as good as that Sam's banner.
Yeah. The best way to say that is we don't give to the church, we give through the church.
Yes.
Right?
That works.
The church is a conduit for God's work in the world, and we want to support that. I saw an interesting thing this week that I had never seen before. Over at SMU, this happened this week, didn't it? Yeah. At SMU, I was attending a conference, and I went over in the Bridwell Library. Over there, they have an exhibit on the Reformation, and particularly the printed word as it relates to the Reformation. And in that exhibit, they have 3 examples of indulgences. Okay? You know what an indulgence is? It's what really, it put Martin Luther over the edge, right? This was, the church at the time was selling certificates of indulgence, where for contributions to the work of the church, mainly for building projects, grand building projects, you could receive a certificate that certified, in Latin of course, that you or a loved one would pass out of purgatory more quickly, right? And these were actually printed, and they have over there the earliest remaining known indulgence certificate in existence today. And of course, I can't read any of it, but it's like a contract. I mean, it's a long, long thing. Here's an example of giving for the wrong reason, right? A lot of us are motivated by things that are going to serve us and our needs. The root problem with selling indulgences is it teaches the wrong idea of generosity, right? And so we don't give of ourselves because we expect something in return. We give because it's an investment in something beyond ourselves, right? It's an investment in something beyond ourselves. We're planting seed. We're back to that Alice Walton quote.
And we give because we love.
And you give because you love. Yeah, indeed. What else does this inspire you to say?
Karen had her hand up.
Oh, yes. Hi. Hi, Karen.
My dad used to give to the little Methodist church in our town. But he would say, even though I don't go to church, I don't want to live in a community that does not have a church. And so he gave regularly to the little Methodist church, even though we didn't go. Except once a year on Easter.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. Yes.
It seems to me that giving, volunteering, really opens you up to life. The vision I have of somebody being overly thrifty is you become very closed. You can just become obsessed with that, and you're just an individual, kind of all bottled up to yourself.
I got one last pitch on this, and then we'll close. As you know, I do a lot of funerals. I preach a lot of funerals, and some are easier than others, and some are very, very hard. The ones that are the hardest are the ones where there's literally nothing to say about the person.
Or nothing good to say about the person.
Or just nothing to say. Not even that there's nothing good, there's just nothing to say because they've done nothing in their life. I mean, they've really done nothing in their life. Spent an entire lifetime being a fine person, being a good person, but there's nothing to say to commend the difference they've made in the world, the seeds they've planted. If you don't think about anything else about generosity, think about your legacy. How are you going to be remembered when you're gone from this earth? Did you invest yourself in others beyond yourself? Or were you just leading a content life all by yourself that didn't interact in any way with anyone else? I hope that you'll choose the investment side of that, because that's where life is abundant and rich. It's not only the biblical model, it's scientifically, biologically proven to make you better, to feel better as well. All right, thus ends the lesson on that. That wasn't too painful, was it? All right. Well, thank you to our live stream audience, and we'll move now on our